The body wouldn't stop burning. For 5 minutes they watched as the flames tried to devour it. The knelt figure was dead, of that they were sure, but it did not succumb to the effects of the fire. Megan started to freak out almost immediately, but Ryan assured her that it was just the clothes. He kicked the body over, sending the aflame figure rolling into the dirt. He kicked it repeatedly until the flames expired, and then cautiously stripped the body of its clothing, careful not to burn his hands on the heated zippers and buttons. When the corpse was completely naked, he doused it in gasoline and threw another match at it. The body instantly caught fire, and the flames wrapped themselves around it like a second skin. For another 5 minutes they watched the body burn. Megan began muttering to herself, then started crying, and Ryan paced around. They were a mile into the desert, a mile away from the highway, and Ryan was sure that the blaze couldn't yet be seen. It was nearing dusk, but the flames were short-heighted, and the car blocked them from view. He probably should have figured out some way to dig a hole in which to bury it before setting it on fire, but he was sure that no one would notice. The stretch of highway beyond them was sparsely traveled at this hour in this region, and no one passing by would bother to stop and investigate a random fire in the desert. Dry foliage caught on fire all the time, and there were no forests toward which the blaze could travel. "We're going to be fine," he said to himself, when he had lit the first match.
Ryan, why isn't it burning?
Megan's voice was shrill and accusing, as if Ryan was responsible for its preternatural resilience to fire. "I don't know, Megan. Maybe he had some skin condition or something." It was the best Ryan could offer, and he knew how stupid it sounded. Megan laughed at that, spat the noise out mockingly, and walked back to the car. The body lay on its back, eyes hidden beneath the flames, but Ryan felt that they were open, staring defiantly at the sun, that greater fire, and ignored its effects just as it did those of the fire coating its body. Ryan hadn't meant for things to go as they had gone. He never meant for the man to die. It was supposed to be a simple roadside carjacking, but the man had resisted, had not heeded Ryan's warning, and instead reached for something in the glove box. Ryan pulled the trigger when he saw the man reaching over, striking him in the shoulder. The man gasped, silently, and fell against the door. Ryan stepped back and watched as the man fell out of the car and writhed around on the road. The man crawled away from the car and towards Ryan, making faint sounds of pain, but otherwise not speaking. Ryan, for a moment, thought to help the man, but Megan kept shouting at him to hurry up, to finish it, and so Ryan shot the man in the head. They bundled him into the trunk, drove several miles away from the initial crime scene, and then turned into the desert, driving another mile through the desiccated land. They had no shovels, so digging a grave was not an option, but the man had a gas can in his trunk and a lighter in the glove compartment. The glove compartment also held an electrolarynx, which Ryan suspected the man had been reaching for, because there was nothing else besides some papers. There was no gun. Megan called to him from the car, shouting that they should just leave. She reasoned that there was nothing that tied the murder to them, and that the man would burn up eventually. While this would normally have been, at least superficially, sound reasoning, Ryan felt that something odd was at work. The flesh showed no signs of injury, and the fires fed hungrily, as if perpetually sated by the corpse. Ryan only smelled the desert air and the far-off scent of animal dung. The awful stench of burning hair, something he was familiar with due to Megan's incompetence with a hair straightener, was absent, as was the scent of burning flesh, with which he was unfamiliar, but was nonetheless sure that he could identify it if it were present. Staring at the body, Ryan felt etiolated and sick. His head swam, and his perception began shifting, making the few objects of the desert distort and twist. There was water in the car, but he didn't feel thirsty, and hadn't been out in the heat long enough to suffer its debilitating effects. He thought it could be the guilt of what he'd done, but he was not a good man. And although this was his first murder, he had done similarly wicked things for nothing more than personal gain. Wanting to be done with the ordeal, and telling himself that Megan was right, Ryan turned away from the burning body and got back in the car. Megan was sprawled across the back seat with a bottle of water on her forehead. She said she was going to nap. That was fine with him. He wanted some space to himself anyway. Darkness came gradually as he drove, and the desert yawned beside him, seeming endless, almost apocalyptically desolate. Their destination was hours away, and Ryan had no plans to stop before they arrived. At least not while in the same state, not in the stolen car of a man he'd murdered. The weakness Ryan had felt back in the desert never left him. Focusing on the road was a consistent struggle. The car made another turn, and Ryan was immediately assaulted with a blinding light. He shielded his eyes with one hand, braked, and turned the wheel into the desert, hoping to avoid what he assumed was another vehicle that had veered into his lane. The car came to an abrupt stop, kicking up a cloud of sand. Ryan's eyes burned, and he saw only white. Megan cursed behind him, and then screamed. For a moment, Ryan thought the oncoming car was barreling toward them, and his body tensed in response. But no impact came, and he only heard the sputtering of the engine and Megan screaming behind him. His vision cleared after a moment, and he became aware of an intense heat to his right. He turned and saw a man covered in fire sitting in the passenger seat. The man whose car he had taken, the man he had shot and set on fire, the man who was supposed to be dead. The burning man's eyes were pits of black, barely visible under the fire. Somehow the upholstery was untouched by the flames, but Ryan felt his body recoil at the heat. Megan's screaming had stopped, and she merely stared ahead, shocked speechless by the ever-burning apparition. Burning Man reached calmly into the glove box, retrieved the electrolarynx, put it to his throat, and leaned in closely to Ryan. The heat singed his flesh, but he didn't dare push the man away, or try to escape through the driver's door. Something beyond fear held him in place, some foresight of imminent doom, or the ensnaring and unyielding chains of guilt. The black and burning pits stared into Ryan's own eyes, and seemed to scorch his very soul. The face that burned stared at him for what felt like an eternity, before putting on a hideous smile. It opened its mouth, and using the electrolarynx, it spoke.
Son, I wouldn't do that if I were you.
The voice was inhuman, an electrified, monstrous, demonic sound, intoned with impressions of sorrow, anger, and a diabolical elation. Ryan screamed, and the thing afire screamed with him, mocking his fear. Megan, who had gone unnoticed or ignored by the infernal Revenant, screamed again, as Ryan was bombarded by callous mimicry. The burning man turned to her, still screaming, and using the electrolarynx, spewed a pillar of fire at her from his mouth. The fire fell on her as if it were sentient, wrapping itself around her body, ignoring everything else. She squirmed, flailed, twisted, and writhed, but the flames were inextinguishable. Death did not come to her, yet the flames ate her relentlessly. Returning to Ryan, who stared with unrelatable horror at Megan, the burning man seized him by the throat and brought him into an embrace. Ryan was instantly set aflame and then thrown back against the driver's door. 3 burned within the car, 2 in unceasing agony, 1 with what seemed almost to be pleasure. 2 screamed while 1 laughed. 2 human voices filled the car with exhalations of their torment, while another matched their choral vigor with its sardonic mimicry. The car, the thing which had entwined the fates of the trio, remained unburdened by the flames. As the sun and moon did their immemorial exchange, a car drove down the road. Eventually, it turned off into that desert which seemed to stretch interminably across the earth, and drove across the dry, featureless land. After a while, a great cavity opened in the earth, and the car descended into its depths. Flames, crimson and hot, consumed the vehicle, incinerating it. Its passengers, already accustomed to the infernal degrees, were unscathed and walked together into the chthonic abyss. The hellmouth closed, and a cool wind wiped away the lingering heat. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. My merch, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, and Discord are down there too. Be good to animals, even people, so...
Ja, snämar, Bergsbus, Rish.